Now, we follow on with one of our reports just now. The EFF has called for the dismantling of the Red Ants. The party's Gauteng Chairperson Mandisa Mashego proposed this before the Alexandra Commission of Inquiry in Braamfontein today. She joins us now in studio. Thanks so much for joining us. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you.
All right, so you had a busy day at the inquiry. By and large, what was it that you wanted to communicate?
Well, they actually initially invited the Commander-in-Chief in relation to the general position of the EFF to occupy land, vacant unused land, and also in relation a little bit about the Alexandra Renewal Project. And so we were responding to that invitation by the Human Rights Commission. Essentially, we opened ourselves up to all and any question that they had to clarify themselves as a panel. But it was critical for us to be honest and to give them genuine responses based on our experiences on the ground here in Gauteng.
All right, so tell us about the land occupation. There is a lot of controversy around that, but this is something that you're very passionate about.
Yes. Look, essentially, I think that even, especially us black people, we tend to forget because we've normalized the post-colonial construct of Africa. And we shouldn't do that because the entire colonial era, the almost 4 centuries now of post-colonial South Africa and over 5 centuries in the entire continent has been marred by great abnormality and dysfunction. And so we've taken that dysfunction and made it a norm. Black people should never have land hunger. Black people should not find themselves in a situation where they don't have a place to stay, have a primary residence. Because it's okay if you can afford and you have more than one house, but a primary residence is absolutely critical for all of us to have. And so it's always important for us to remind all citizens, not really necessarily because they support EFF or they vote for EFF, but if you're an African per se, the biggest struggle for you is land, economic emancipation, and of course the greater target for us to unite Africans so that we can all benefit from the resources of our continent. How
do we manage then? There are laws, there are bylaws, and there are needs that the people have. How do we manage both of these interests? Because what can happen, and often does happen, is when people illegally occupy land, they build structures on top of sewage systems and so on and so forth and create even more problems. So how do we balance these two?
And we have a serious problem with that situation because you know that in Alexandra, a majority of the Stretla area, part of Alexandra is actually on very dangerous territory because majority of the structures are literally built inside the river system. And so a slight rainfall and you have a crisis, and we've seen it before in Alexandra and other areas. Alexandra is just an example. But here's the issue. Do you blame a poor person for finding any available piece of land to put up an informal dwelling so that they can have shelter for themselves and their children? Where must they go? They can't live in caves. They can't dig holes in the ground. Even the holes in the ground, if they do dig them, they'll be told this land belongs to so and so. And so, like I said earlier, we've normalized a post-colonial dysfunctional African society where Africans don't have anywhere to go unless they have money to buy, a house or to get a bond. And so what needs to happen is that the current government, anyone who governs South Africa, must prioritize the expropriation of land without compensation in order to deal with reparations. Because we all forget, we've never received reparations. A simple thing like the taxes we pay as black people. Black people have not received reparations economically. We have not received land justice since the land was grabbed from us violently. And so we've just continued with a situation which is abnormal. And more importantly, Peter, the laws that govern us, by the way, we must remind each other, they're not our laws. You can go into history and research how South African laws came about. Black people were not part of making these laws. Someone will come with an argument and say post-94, we can't say that. But even then, Do you know that there's over 2,000 pieces of legislation under the current government that are apartheid laws which the ANC, since they've gone into government, have not bothered to amend?
So one of the tensions in Alexandra in particular is that residents in Alexandra are saying to the municipality, stop these illegal dwellings being built. How do you talk to them and at the same time you talk to someone who says, I'm homeless? What do I do?
We have been speaking to, that part of Alexandra that is immediately affected currently. And as you know, we speak to communities all the time as the EFF, not always in front of the TV cameras. We have regular community engagements. In fact, it's one of our policy positions that all public representatives cannot represent anything in council and the legislature without having engaged directly with the constituency. They can't grab things from the media. So the issue is that the entire Alexandra is illegal. If you look at how Alexandra even came about as far back as 1904, Alexandra was only given legal residential status in 1982. And in 1994, when the ANC, I almost said the EFF, when the ANC took over, they didn't bother to go and correct the things that, the abnormalities. And I'm making an example with Alexandra. There are many, many places in the province that permanently exist as informal settlements. And because as black people, we've internalized our own subordination to white people and other race groups, we have accepted that it's normal for a black person to live in a shack. And if you find a white person in a shack, you want to write on Twitter about it.
All right. So I'm running out of time. So a couple of issues. You want the red ants gone.
Yeah.
So if they're gone, that means you are letting people set up these illegal dwellings, because until the laws are changed, they're illegal. So what do we do?
The biggest abnormality is the red ants. The person who ushered in the era of red ants is Paul Mashatile. And I challenge him to come and contest what I'm saying. In 1996, between 1996 and 1998, he was Human Settlements MEC for Gauteng under the ANC. And he carried out the first violent forced removals from Alexandra to Diepsloot of black people. He comes from Alex and threw people in an open field there. So the red ants, Peter, are not part of an evictions process, by the way. It's an abnormality that the ANC has forced us to accept. The ANC denied in the first term of our being in the legislature that they've used the red ants. We had to go and find invoices that proved that they had paid the red ants, and also had to force the city of Joburg to accept after they denied that they were using the red ants, and we had to prove that there was a contract existing with the red ants. Why did they start off by denying if it was not an abnormality and they were fully aware that it's abnormal? But let's come to the issue of an eviction and demolition. It's a process within law, right? But it must be legally done. And before even I can evict you from a property that you might be renting from me, between me and the municipality and yourself, we must find you alternative accommodation, and it's the responsibility of the Department of Human Settlements. The PI Act says so. It's the Prevention of Illegal Evictions Act. It says so. A court of law cannot even issue an eviction order unless they've satisfied themselves that the municipality has provided alternative accommodation. So we don't want Johan Bosch's company anymore.
So the municipality is breaking the law, essentially.
And the provincial government.
Okay. Final question. Karima Brown wins in court today. What's the view of the EFF? Are there any regrets about what happened?
No comment.
What do you mean, no comment?
No comment.
But your party had said that you welcomed the decision.
Of course, yeah. We'll abide by any court ruling as we always do, but no further comment.
Okay, no regrets at all?
No further comment.
No apologies?
No further comment.
No action to stop this kind of thing happening in the future?
No comment.
Okay, we'll leave it there. Thanks so much indeed for joining us.
Thank you.